How's it going, everyone? My name is ZEROMATTER here, hosting the ZEROMATTER experiment. First of all, I just want to apologize. I meant to get this video out literally within the same week I wanted to get, or rather, the same week I wanted Hollow Knight to be done. So I apologize that this video is just about a month out of my last content, which I think I'll probably put, it's over here somewhere, and that also seems to be the best way. So it'll be over here somewhere or over here, it depends. This is literally an impromptu apology to the Hollow Knight fans, to anyone that even bothered watching my series, my run through of Hollow Knight. I apologize. I can explain. So due to a lot of time constraints, what ended up happening was so many things ended up falling on top of each other at the same time. Hollow Knight ended in the same week, or rather within the same time frame, that there was a lot of things going on in life. Specifically, I will say that we went to Anime NYC shortly after completing Hollow Knight. I think maybe within 10 days after that, kind of. It was really whoa. I had to make sure I got this out. I had to prepare for all that mentally, physically, and it was just crazy. But I'll talk a little bit about that right now, and then I promise the rest of this video is just Hollow Knight. Anime NYC, biggest anime weeb convention in New York City. Me and the fiance, we've been going every year. We had to do a lot of extra things. I'm sure maybe I'll probably make a video about that too, but again, that's in due time. Just remember, or rather if you knew, hey, by the way, sup, I'm a one-man show. Okay, I don't have a team to help me develop these types of videos in any kind of fashion, and honestly, I will say this right from the get-go, so maybe this might give you a small taste of how I felt about completing Hollow Knight. After doing such an exhaustive run of Hollow Knight, I needed rest severely. With that being said, let's get straight into the video. First and foremost, I definitely want to say something in regards to Hollow Knight. It was quite a game, unlike anything I've ever played before. The only games I could really realistically compare that to would be Limbo, if anyone knows anything about that, and by the same studio that made Limbo. Another game that they made, two of my personal favorites, is Limbo and Inside, both from the same studio. I think for some reason it really resonated with me in the way that, I was just okay, yeah, I could see myself getting into this game. It's I saw mild similarities for sure. I think part of it is the fact that, now again, you have every right to correct me if I'm wrong, and I completely understand it, but it's in the platforming genre, or at least I want to consider those three games within the platforming genre. I think I have a very interesting fascination with the platform genre, if I'm going to be very honest with you. For the longest time, there's always the classic shooty pew pew games, first person, third person, and then the elongated storytelling games in third person. There's a whole bunch of that, but what I don't see a lot of is a lot of interesting platforming games that are naturally talked about. Limbo was dumped on my doorstep many years ago. We actually did a run through of that. Inside, I wanted to hold so much hype into it. If you want to see how that went, I'll probably link video description somewhere, posted somewhere, because I gotta say, very fun time with both those games, and shout out to Bladehead Studios, because again, as far as I'm concerned, like I said, given all the games that are out there, those are probably my top tier favorite games I've ever played on repeat over and over. I never get tired playing it. They're very, very good. Then in enters Hollow Knight. So Hollow Knight, we announced back in our Twitch end of the year Twitch recap, because we do stream on Twitch as well. We introduced that game, and a lot of people were super excited about it. Me, I was completely clueless about it. I'm gonna be really honest with you. I knew next to nothing about Hollow Knight. I'm telling you right now, I will probably repeat this over and over again. I knew next to nothing other than the fact that it's a game, fancy title, maybe the main character, and I really mean maybe the main character, and just that it existed. That's it. That's all I knew about it. That being said, the main character I thought was kind of cool. Now we're getting to the likes aspect about it. What I got out of Hollow Knight, my very first run, okay? I thought the character was kind of cool. I think, he's a pretty like small kind of guy, but like, he's got to take on these giant enemies and whatnot, and it's pretty straightforward. You don't, at least in the beginning, you didn't necessarily get too many special attacks. You just had your dinky little sword, and you just went right into town, going at it with some of these bosses, if you will. One I think of, if not my favorite bosses, was probably, I think it was a trio. Oddly enough, really having the deck stacked against you. I guess it was the Mantis Lords. Good first quarter, good first quarter of the game in there, and I was like, these are pretty interesting bosses to fight, until they really flip the switch on you, where you fight the one, and then all of a sudden you gotta fight the two again. I thought it was interesting. It took me a while to get that down, but that was very nice, very nice. One of the more interesting aspects about it was the fact that, it really tested your reflexes, going in and out of the different, I guess, levels, biomes, world sections, whatever you want to call them. Not like the way Limbo and Inside did. Limbo and Inside was a very steady pace. With Hollow Knight, you had to be quick, somewhat. You had to be really quick on thinking on your feet, given the scenario, because anything could happen at any given moment. It could literally go from 0 to 100 real quick. I thought it was very interesting. It's definitely like a good wake-up call. I think that's the key factor there, is that it was a very good wake-up call at certain pivotal moments in the game. Not to mention the hidden narrative and the hidden lore that it actually has, like the world. Like, there's a whole vast world. We know nothing about it. And then, of course, as you're playing and progressing through the game, you kind of get little tidbits. So it's a very good like little sprinkle of teases here and there. And I mildly thought that was relatively entertaining. It was enjoyable, given the fact that you just survived something else. Maybe you learn a little bit about the history of the world that it takes place in. Very interesting. Very interesting. Graphic-wise, or rather aesthetically pleasing, it's a very aesthetic world, and I liked it. It was, for what it was. Again, with a lot of games that are coming out these days, they're super high tech. They gotta render so much stuff, and super duper ultra engine real. I don't know, 39 or by this point, by the time this video comes out. But in all seriousness, just the way that everything was laid out in Hollow Knight, it was very good, very colorful, very dark, gruesome, interesting, mysterious. Even it checked out a lot of things on my list of things, like what really draws my attention. The worlds about it, all aesthetically pleasing to look at, very, very interesting. Now, another thing I will say that I personally don't hear much about these days, or rather people talk a lot about it less, that I have seemed to grow a lot more fond of over the years, is the audio and sound design for Hollow Knight. I will praise it. I will definitely praise it, that for sure. Hollow Knight definitely really, really had my attention, in the fact that they had such very intricate and interesting audio and sound design. Again, to many people, you might not care about audio design, but for an audio junkie like me, I really, really, really dive into, when the sound hits, whatever, the way that some sound effects happen, the scoring, the soundtrack, all of it. None of it went to waste whatsoever. And what I liked about it is the fact that, you still had constant atmosphere in the game, which, again, not a lot of games of this particular genre really, really nail home. At least to my liking. At least, because it's kind of usually like a lot of dead air in between certain things. Here, you were always just in the zone, in the flow. You always felt like you were immersed in the world. Again, my honest opinion, but this is just coming from me, who's an audio junkie. I did enjoy a lot of the audio designing that went into this game, 100%. And I guess if anyone wants to know what my favorite theme was, I can name one right off the bat, because I think in the middle of filming the game, I was really just like, whoa, hold up, this is interesting. Like, it's got me pondering, it's got me thinking. I think it was the City of Tears. It's in that section of the level with like a lot of like the royal-esque looking characters. Again, I'm bad, just cut me some slack with remembering the stuff. It was already so long ago by this point. But yeah, definitely in that area, I think personally, I was like, whoa, I like this. This is really good. You have my attention for sure. Okay, just as I said before, I'm gonna make this very clear once again. Before I dive right into this next thing, let me just, just humor me for a little bit, okay? You might not like what I have to say in regards to this second half. It's gonna be things that I'm kind of nitpicking, cherry picking, things that I didn't really enjoy. You might like it, your opinion is fine, just know that, I'm not from the community, I guess. I'm literally just a solo person who just experienced his very first run in Hollow Knight with no context. I'll say that again, with absolutely no context whatsoever about the world revolving around in Hollow Knight. Any of the bosses, any of the things that I probably should have done before I got to certain different parts of the game or whatever. Next to nothing. I did that on purpose because, again, I know the game has been out for quite some time, but when I like to experience a game that I've never touched before, I want to get as much out of it as I can in a genuine sense that when I see something, I expect it to, hit me full force, whether it's excitement, scariness, surprising. I want that it factor, and it's really hard to replicate when you kind of do your research about the game, because by the time you get to it, you already know what to kind of expect. In this particular case, especially for Hollow Knight, I will give it that maybe I probably should have done a little more insight in on, like some reviews on it to make sure, where I was going. But the person in me, the gamer in me, really wanted to experience Hollow Knight at its fullest, in its purest form, I guess I could say, so that I didn't take away from what it had to offer. So if you understood that, then this next part is just the cons, the stuff that I had to nitpick and cherry pick. And again, I'm just being 100% honest. Don't come after me because I know how some people get. But again, as someone who has never experienced anything like Hollow Knight before, these are the things that really stood out to me that I guess I just could not look away from. I guess we'll start off with something relatively small. Again, if you're into exploration, then this one is probably one that you might disagree with, and again, that's fine. But one of the things that really got me, I guess, slightly annoyed, aggravated at times especially, is the sense of direction. Because, again, if you've played the game, which I'm sure most of you have if you're watching this video, there is no sense of direction. At least for a good chunk of the game, meaning you go at your own pace, wherever you want to go, grind wherever it is that you feel like grinding up, that you feel the need to, I guess. Most of it comes from the geo, I guess, right? The sense of direction is kind of confusing. Again, because I'll explain why. When I'm exploring a map section rather, I couldn't find exactly where I needed to go, and even at times when I found a new location, it was just still kind of blocked off, with no context, no nothing, no whatever. So in that particular moment, after you just come out of like a boss fight, or after you're doing something relatively like big that's an integral part to the game, and you just met with like dead end right here, it gets kind of frustrating. I know maybe the whole point, a lot of you people are probably screaming at me saying, no, you're supposed to go exploring and this and that. I did that. And again, the problem is that it's very little things that you miss that could ultimately help you as you progress in the game. But not to mention, you don't get an easy pass, because once you go in and out of areas, all those enemies that you just blasted your way through just to get from point A to point B, they come back. And at the same time, it's just like it gets really exhausting really quick, in that sense that, if you're not if you're not in the right mindset to play a game like this, then I would see how, for a lot of people that are not used to this type of game, where that trajectory of gaming can really be exhausting. Because again, if you think about it, you drop down, you beat a bunch of enemies, and then you're just kind of like walking around blindly a good chunk of the time. You know, even then, when I had the compass, it was kind of just like, all right, I visited these places, I just don't know where else to go, because once you do something, it's just kind of left in the air. It's like, all right, go your own adventure, I guess. And then after a while, I'm kind of just like, just give me a sense of direction, like where I gotta go. Because I'm not gonna lie, spending a good 30 minutes kind of traversing, especially when you get to the bigger picture, spending a good like almost 30 minutes, again, with not really any more context, just kind of getting insanely lost in between places here and there, it gets really exhausting, and I could see why a lot of people would not find that really fun. I would say the only redeeming part about that is finding the good lad that is Cornifer. If you hear him, you're kind of in good hands, especially if you've never been to the area before. But then at the same time, again, surprise, surprise, once you progress, you find him in an area, you hear him, but then you can't really get to him. And again, you're kind of left with the question of, how do I get there? You could spend a good 10 minutes trying to figure out how to get to a certain area before you realize, like, oh, I guess I can't get there yet. But at the same time, the game implements itself like, you know, you could build your own path. Could be dangerous depending on whoever the gamer is, I suppose. But realistically, when there's little to no context on how to get to certain places or whatever, and then you just come after traversing a good chunk of the map already, it's pretty, like, annoying. And just, you know, it's just aggravating at that point. You're just like, now you're just really teasing me. I get that the game is built like a Dark Souls thing, all right? You know, you got to get good. But at some point, even the general gamer just be like, you know what? I got to break from this. Oh, man. This next one, again, it is what it is, because it kind of all just ties together. Is the amount of backtracking I have to do. It was just so exhausting. It was just a lot of time eating away when I realistically don't think it should have to be away. Again, it's just my take. It's fine. But, you know, again, when you finish something, let's say in this part of the world, and then the next thing is like, you got to get down here in this part of the map, right? You have to do so much backtracking. You could also argue that, you know, you could take the tram system, okay? I'll just cut right to the chase. You could take the tram system, but even then, that does not guarantee you that it's going to take you to the spot that you have to go. It takes you to certain areas, and at that point, another factor kind of steps in as to why it was kind of annoying traversing certain areas in the map. When you're using the tram system, the map itself that comes up is not necessarily good. So the other thing is that it kind of forces you to remember the name of the station that you want to go to. You kind of have to like visualize it, right? And at the same time, when you got a lot of other things going on that you kind of already have to focus on, that's the last thing I think I should really have to kind of just like force myself to remember. The game is a little unforgiving in that way. I guess after you learn the systems of where it is you gotta go, sure, it becomes helpful. But other than that, you know, most of the tram stations, they're not close enough to the objective to where it is you need to go, because then you still have to go completely out and around, especially if a certain area is completely cut off because you haven't earned access to that point yet, you know. At that point, it's kind of just like, this is just really a lot of exhaustive walking. Again, if you're into it, fine, cool, whatever. You could spend a whole day there. Good for you. Not me, not so much. Also, speaking of the tram systems, how it all connects with the tram systems, the maps, backtracking, and this is what I mean by this. And it's happened to me several times. You all know what I'm talking about at this point. When you're in the zone of the game, and you completely miss this one key element, this is what I mean by the backtracking and the traversing across this is so exhausting. If you forget to sit down on a bench, you know, again, anyone can say whatever you want, but you know, that should be the number one rule of thumb, that you should always sit down on a bench no matter what. You can't honestly sit there and tell me it has not happened to you once, because I would want to argue that it has happened to everyone at least once. It's happened to everyone at least once, and then when you miss that initial part, it's just like, oh, really? You're gonna do that? Fine, I suppose. There's also something that I found a little interesting in terms of the combat system. It's pretty cut and dry what it is you need to do once you figure it out. Of course, your main weapon is like the nail, right? I think is what it is, the nail. And of course, you have your spells. And especially with some of the way some of the boss fights went, you have to pick and choose your battles respectively. You have to pick and choose your charms respectfully as well. And that the other thing too about that is that you could only switch them at the bench. Like, I mean, I guess to kind of give you the incentive to visit the bench, but it's just me nitpicking about how I feel about it. In the heat of the moment, when you forget last second, you want to switch it, and you realize, oh wait, you can't, because you got to go to the bench, which is all the way there across town or whatever, just to come back over here and fight this guy, win or lose or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, that's just an annoying system. And speaking of the combat systems, the combat system, we got gifted. As we made our way through the game, we got gifted a lot of things that I never really used, because it was all for me. Okay, for me it was relatively situational, and it's kind of just like, with the way that the enemies are going, they're not going to give me time to load this up. No way. They're not going to give me time to set up this type of move that does a good amount of damage, I'm sure. But there's no way in hell that I'm going to be able to hit those whatsoever. I guess in terms of upgrading your weapon, that's another thing that they just completely they introduced that system too. Like, yeah, you can grind up your nail, you can make it more powerful, but again, that becomes an afterthought in the other grand scheme of things once you're out on your adventure, because again, then it's the whole, you gotta really find your way back to the section, get it done. You have to meet the requirements, of course. Getting ore is not relatively easy. I mean, I guess you could buy it, but that only gets you so far. And then afterwards, it's kind of just like, oh, all right, yeah. And then hope that it's powerful enough to take on the next enemy, I suppose. And even as grueling as all that process is, I want to kind of give it, I want to be like a relatively good steady line, I suppose. So by the end of it, with the way that we ended our run as well, now that I know that there's others, was it all worth it? That is a very interesting question. I've been trying to answer in a relatively decent kind of way since we ended our run with Hollow Knight. Was it all worth it? I would say for the experience of playing Hollow Knight, sure, it was relatively worth it. That, you got to play a relatively interesting platformer. It has a lot of interesting mechanics that would appeal to some people to really pique your interest in the game like this. By the end of it all, I would say everyone's experience is different. I would say you either loved it or you really hated it to the point where you just didn't even make it. By this point in time, I've done my research and I've seen and I've heard and I've read that a lot of people just kind of gave up midway. This is kind of just more like, people that, again, first-time triers, tried it, and really couldn't connect with the platforming genre aspect of it. I mean, I would assume it would have to be that I can't imagine it being anything else, because again, everything about the game, don't get me wrong, I would assume is great, but I think it has something to do with the platforming aspect as to why people couldn't finish it, ultimately gave up. The difficulty, sure, I guess, so that comes at a very minor inconvenience. A lot of it was just the whole platforming aspect of the game, as to why maybe some people were kind of turned off by it. Okay, so what the hell would I rate this thing? Now, given the fact that there's a lot of pros, some decent amount of cons, I don't hate the game entirely. At the same time, this is just everything that I took from my side of things, being mildly objective about the game, critical of some criticisms here and there that I think are fair. Again, I'm not trying to trash the game, okay? I'm trying to be nice about it. Again, just stuff that I was fair. And remember, I knew nothing about the game going in. I learned what I learned, and I got out. So I would say maybe an honest 8. All right, an honest 8. That it was good for what I got out of it. And I'll tell you what particular aspect got me to that 8. And I would say it's really important. It's probably one of the most important things about it. Mainly because I don't hear much about it. It definitely had to do with the fact with the audio design, the scoring, all that. That, I'm telling you, for an audio junkie like me, guys, you guys have absolutely no idea how much I love the sound design, all the audios, the themes, and all that. It really gets you going. I'm not gonna lie. It was really, really entertaining, despite everything else coming in back into like a calm tune or whatever. Very nice. Very nice. Well, that's me reviewing Hollow Knight, our first ever playthrough ever, since we, again, knew next to nothing. Will there ever be a continuation of this? I have absolutely no idea, so do not expect that from me whatsoever. We have a very busy schedule on our hands, and we gotta keep the truck moving. But again, I will say for my final thoughts, the game was fun, entertaining, mildly frustrating. I definitely had some dark moments where I literally was just like, no, thank God. A lot of the stuff was, in that regards, was kind of caught off camera, so not a lot of people got to see that. But yeah, other than that, what I got out of the game, I thought it was fun. To people of the community, to anyone that's watched this that have, thought it was a fair review on it, or, if you want to criticize about it, we can talk about it in the points, comments, whatever. To anyone that's even actually watched this video, thank you so much for watching. This is actually my first review ever of a game, in all honesty, and I thought it was pretty straightforward. And I figured with a game like Hollow Knight, it needed an explanation for everything that I did, and all my actions that went into the game or whatever. All right, if you made it this far, you're actually going to see something that's going to take about maybe 15 seconds. If you have 15 seconds, here's what it is. So when I announced initially the ending of Hollow Knight on a particular server, we did it in a style of kind of Toonami. So if you made it over here, you're going to see exactly how we created it, and I hope you guys like it. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and here it is. Here is what I call the final episode of Hollow Knight. Enjoy. Well guys, it's been a blast. This game leaves us with quite the journey. Hollow Knight, the final episode, premieres tomorrow. Check your local listings. Only